Hi, we're live with Talk to Us Tuesday. This is our 30-minute Facebook Live chat. I'm here with our Brighton Police Chief and our Emergency Management Coordinator, and they're here to answer all your questions about safety and emergency preparedness. So I'm going to allow our guests to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. Chief?
I'm Paul Southard, Chief of Police of the Brighton Police Department. I've been the Chief of Police for 2 years now. I've been with the city since 1988.
And I'm Stephanie Hackett. I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of Brighton and also the Brighton Fire Rescue District. I've been with the city and the fire district for about 6 years now.
Great. We'll be live for the next 30 minutes, so if you have any questions, now is your time to leave them, and we'll try and get to as many questions as we can in the next 30 minutes. But I want to start with Chief. So school is approaching. Kids are going to be returning to school, which always means increased traffic, and parents often ask us, what's PD doing to help make sure kids are safe and make sure drivers are acting accordingly? So tell us a little bit about that.
What we normally do every school year before the school year is we do what we call a traffic safety blitz. We bring in people on a modified schedule, and we'll do extra patrols around the schools. We'll pick a school for a day, do extra patrols around the school, traffic enforcement, make sure everything is safe for the kids, kind of get motorists back in the groove and the understanding that there are kids out there headed to school.
Great. And what should drivers look for as they're driving near schools?
Well, one of the big things to look for is the traffic zones. The school zones. 20-mile-an-hour zones. Pay particular attention to those school zones, to the kids walking. The other thing to watch out are for the school buses and the stop signs on the school buses. Don't drive around the school bus when the red lights are flashing.
Great. Okay, we have our first question. This question is for Chief. Decay says, this is off topic, but why is it that sex offenders are allowed to live so close to schools? Can you tell us about that?
Well, there are different regulations, and some of it is there are different levels of sex offenders, all the way from minor sex offenses to sexual predators. We don't have a predator here in town. But one of the things that there are regulations that are formed in order to allow people to live in certain places. There are places, for instance, in Georgia, there was a law not allowing people to live within 1,000 feet of a school. They had encampments of sex offenders because they had nowhere to go. So we register sex offenders annually. They have quarterly meetings. We have part of our sex assault task force responsibilities now is we have a detective assigned to register sex offenders periodically. In fact, he's here today doing that. He registers sex offenders here and in the city of Commerce City.
Great. And where can people go to find out more information about sex offenders? And
they can go to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation website.
Okay.
There are links on there. There's also a link through the Sheriff's Office for the website.
Great. Speaking of children, the Brighton Police Department implemented the Be Right On program. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what it does?
We taught the DARE program for several years starting in the late 80s, and as things have progressed since then, and when we started it, we didn't have social media and we didn't have those kind of things that we had to be concerned with our kids. So on the heels of that, we decided to move away from the DARE program and we developed our own program. And what that program does is that talks about social media, it talks about other pressures now that kids didn't have when DARE was conceived all those years ago. It talks about cell phone use, it talks about bullying. We also cover extensively marijuana, although it's legal in Colorado. It's not legal for everyone. We cover those kind of topics.
Great. Again, we're here with our police chief and emergency management coordinator, so if you have any questions that they can answer, we'll be live for the next half hour and we'll get to as many questions as possible. Stephanie, I want to turn it over to you. So in your role as emergency management coordinator, you serve both the city and the Brighton Fire Rescue. Can you talk about your role and what you do?
Yeah, so as the emergency manager for the city and the fire district, I spent a lot of time working on emergency plans, on training, on exercises, and in really coordinating both among our city departments and the fire district, as well as with our community partners, Tri-County Health Department, our hospitals, the Red Cross, all different types of folks and organizations who might be working in or with the city of Brighton during a disaster.
Talk a little bit about some of the trainings you've done and the exercises, and how have those helped?
Well, we spend a lot of time doing training on our Emergency Operations Center here for the City of Brighton. So that essentially is a coordination center where folks here, both city employees and some of our outside partners, and can come in and work on the consequence management pieces of disasters. So fortunately, we've got our police and firefighters who are out on the front lines and really working in the community during a disaster. But as the emergency manager, we work with our partners to really look at what some of those consequences are. So we work on things like sheltering, on collecting information, on damage assessments, and in really working with the community to assess what those needs are during a disaster and figuring out ways to help manage those consequences while still supporting our first responders who are in the field.
Great. And you've been helping out with some of the response efforts for the wildfires. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then how people here should prepare if they're ever in that situation?
Sure. So very recently, I just got back from assisting Huerfano County with the spring fire response. And so a big part of what I did working in their emergency operations center was working in their plan section. So as the fire actually reached full containment, what we do in that consequence management, emergency management piece is really work with folks in the community. So we worked on reentry plans and getting folks back to their homes. We worked with them on damage assessments, and really with the county and the county officials in trying to transition from that emergency response mode to disaster recovery, and how folks are going to try to reclaim their lives and get back to whatever that new normal looks like.
Right. What would you say people in the community should do to prepare for a fire, if that should ever, we should ever experience something like that?
Folks should always really look at their community and see what some of the bigger hazards are in their community, and think about what some of those consequences might look like. So here in Brighton and Adams County, our wildfire risk isn't quite as high, but we've got some huge risks around hazardous materials, around winter storms and hail, around tornadoes and heat waves and stuff. So it's really important to take a look at the community that you work in and that you live in, and kind of figure out what those higher risks are, and take some time to plan with your family around managing some of those consequences that are really unique to your family and to your community.
Great. Chief, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that the police department faces?
Some of the biggest challenges, one is growth. Town is growing at a good rate, and we're having a little difficulty keeping up with that. Our staff isn't always what it should be. Part of the problem with staffing is recruitment. It's difficult to recruit in this day and age, in this environment right now. Some of the bad publicity that police departments get or law enforcement gets kind of bleeds over into that, and people feel they'd be overly scrutinized. But there are a lot of people who step up and are willing to come work for us. So those are the challenges. The increases in traffic. Marijuana, although it's legal, it creates concerns for us, and it creates some problems with us with illegal grows and those kind of things. People who aren't abiding by the ordinance, the city ordinance. And in general, just in general, the increase in call load.
Great. So you mentioned marijuana, and we get this question a lot. What are the rules for growing marijuana in your home?
Well, in individual residence, it's 50 square feet. The plants can't cover more than 50 square feet, and they can't be any closer than 2 feet from the ceiling. In a attached home, say an apartment or a townhouse or something like that, it can't be any more than 35 square feet.
Okay. If you have questions for our police department or emergency management, we're live now and we can answer your questions. If we don't get to you today or while we're live, please feel free to leave your question. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. So Chief, another question for you. What would you say your officers spend most of their time responding to?
Most of their time is spent responding to some of the, maybe the less, I don't want to say important, that's not the right word, but the less, the time-consuming calls. Some of those calls, like let's say for shoplifters, for instance, shoplifting, some of the calls have taken off a lot of an officer's time. We had a lot of retail establishments, and to arrest a shoplifter and to process a shoplifter can take, sometimes depending on the severity of the crime or the amount of things stolen, hours out of an officer's time.
Right. And would you say that there's any crime trends that we're seeing that are unique to Brighton or to this area?
Not necessarily unique to Brighton. I think we have a lot of the same things in every community. One of the things that I would encourage people is to lock your cars at night. We have a lot of people who have things stolen out of their cars just simply because they didn't lock their car. We have people who will walk along trying car doors in the middle of the night. When they find an open one, they'll go through the car. So that's one of those things that people have some control over. They're looking for the easy targets, and we can prevent that by doing something that simple.
Speaking of that, we see a lot of posts on social media about people having cars stolen or things stolen and reporting that online, but that doesn't necessarily always make its way to the police department. So what's the best way for people to report crimes?
The best way to report crimes is to call our non-emergency number, 303-288-1535. That's the best way to report a crime. You can have an officer respond. We're moving towards online reporting, a good system of online reporting, but that's still in the works. In the meantime, the best thing to do is to call that number.
Okay. We have a comment from Carl Craigle. Kudos to the dedicated men and women of the Brighton Police Department. Awesome job day and night. Thank you, Carl, for those kind words and for tuning in. And anyone else, if you're tuning in and have questions, now's the time to ask them. We'll be live for a little bit longer. Stephanie, I want to turn it back to you. And speaking of emergency situations, Code Red is a way that people can sign up for notifications. Can you talk about that and how people can sign up?
Absolutely. So Code Red is an emergency notification system that we use here in the city of Brighton, and we use it through a big portion of Adams County as well. The great thing about this system is folks can actually choose how they want to be notified. So if you prefer to get a call on your cell phone as opposed to your home phone, maybe a text message or an email, the system allows you to opt in and choose the best way to get emergency information. The key there is really that folks have to proactively go and opt into the system. So you can find a link to the Code Red system under Safety Services on the City of Brighton's website. You can also find it on Adams County's website or on ADCOM 911's website. But the key is really to go in and opt in because we don't automatically populate that system with your phone number.
Okay. A couple more comments have come in. Decay says, thank you for all you do. Brighton PD has exceptional officers. Thank you for that kind comment. And Chief, question from Shelley. She says that we live in Brighton off of the road, but we are on the Weld County side. Who do we contact in case of an emergency?
If you're actually in the city of Brighton, but in Weld County, because we do have annexed up into Weld County, but if you're in the city of Brighton, call the 288 number, 1535.
Okay.
That's a non-emergency number. Or if it's something serious, call 911.
Okay, thank you. Oh, she says off-road too. So, okay, Stephanie, talk to us a little bit. The city does the tornado sirens, a once-a-month test. Mm-hmm. But what should people do if they actually see a tornado or if those sirens are going off and it's not a test?
So the best thing to do if you see a tornado or if you hear the sirens go off is to go inside, to seek shelter, and get more information. Do not go outside and try to follow it or take pictures or get your photos submitted on a local news channel. That's a really good way to get hurt. The best way, again, is to go inside, have a plan about where you're going to go in your house, in your school, at work, when you hear the tornado sirens or when you actually see a tornado, and have a plan to get more information. The National Weather Service will issue very clear warnings that'll have a start time and an end time, so you know how long you need to be sheltered in your basement or an interior room if you don't have a basement. And you know how long the duration of those warnings are going to last. So whether it's having a phone or a computer or having a battery-operated weather radio in your shelter area, that gives you some more information about what's actually going on outside.
Okay, speaking of emergency situations, you talk a lot about how people should make a kit. What does that kit look like? How long should they have supplies available?
So one of the things that we ask the public to do, in addition to being able to get information and kind of know what's going on in your community, is to create a 3-day or a 72-hour kit. And there's some basic items in this kit that pretty much every family really needs to have: the food, the water, some medical supplies. But essentially your kit's going to look different depending on how many people are in your family, if you have children in your family, if you've got dogs or cats or fish, if you're potentially taking care of an elderly parent or an elderly family member. So you really want to think about having some of those basic items, but then really thinking about customizing that kit to be appropriate for your family and the folks who live in your house for those items that they might need over about 3 days.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. We're getting a lot of love here live. A couple of more kudos have come in. Amanda says, thank you, Brighton PD, love you guys. And Carl says, Steph is awesome. Through her efforts, the city of Brighton is a role model for emergency preparedness. Thank you guys for your kind words. And again, if you have questions, feel free to leave them here, and we'll try and get to as many as we can. And if not, we'll answer them once we're not live. So I want to turn it back over to Chief and talk a little bit about community policing. This is a concept that the police department has embraced. What is it? What does it look like?
Well, community policing's essentially been around since 1829. Severin Peel started developing this back in England. What we believe is, and what Peel espouses is the community is the police and the police are the community. What that means is a partnership, and it's a partnership between the community and the police department. We can't do everything on our own. We can't be the eyes and ears everywhere. We need people to help us out. Problem-solving efforts, we strive towards problem-solving efforts. For instance, if we have a problem in a certain area with maybe burglaries or vehicle break-ins, and we can establish that there is something going on there that we can have an impact on, we may engage the community and here's what we want to do, here's how you can prevent this, going back to the cars. That is working with the community to solve crime and to also battle crime. Great.
And recently, Brighton and Commerce City joined together to form the Sexual Assault Response Team. What is that, and why is it beneficial to combine resources with our neighboring community?
Well, now the Sex Assault Response Team and the Sex Assault Task Force are intertwined, but they're two different things. The response team is a district-wide, judicial district-wide team that that works on best practices for sexual assault reporting and monitors how sexual assaults are being reported. The Sex Assault Task Force, we work with Commerce City as a partnership. Commerce City received a grant, and at the beginning of the year in January, we put the team together. We have two detectives and a sergeant from here, and then Commerce City has 3 detectives and a commander. And they work out of the Adams County Government Center. They specialize in sexual assault cases of any magnitude.
Okay, great. What have you, I guess it's only been around for a short while, but what have you seen as the benefits?
We have actually seen more cases being reported, more than we expected. But one of the benefits that it has for both agencies is that caseload now is taken out of our investigations unit. So we have detectives upstairs who still work the other cases, the thefts and the burglaries and even the homicide cases if we have a homicide case. Our detectives still work that, but they don't have that sex assault task or sex assault caseload. On top of that, those detectives now down there concentrating on that are better able to maybe identify trends, to identify patterns, to work closer with the victims.
Okay. And one of the programs that you all implemented some time back is the You Have Options.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
That gives victims, sex assault victims, an opportunity to report at different levels. They may want to report it, but not do anything about it. That's completely okay. They may want to report up to a certain point where I'll report it and I'll identify the victim, but I don't want to be identified. Or I'm sorry, I'll identify the suspect that I don't want to be identified, all the way up to I want to fully pursue this thing.
Okay.
So it gives the victim the option to move at their own pace.
Okay. And there's information available on the Brighton Police Department website if you're interested in the You Have Options program and different ways of reporting. A question that we often get, two-part, how can I complain about speeders on my street, and how do I make a complaint about weeds or trash in my neighbor's yard?
Well, going back to the 303-288-1535, the non-emergency number, you can call that to report speeders. Also helps if you have an idea of maybe who the speeder is. You may have a certain vehicle who's constantly doing it, maybe during school hours, maybe a school zone, something like that, as much detail as we can get. You can also call the police department's main number. You'll be sent to that same 288 number. As far as weeds and trash and those kind of things go, you can report those also to the non-emergency number. Our community service officers work through the police department. They handle animal control and code enforcement complaints. Also you can report them on the website, www.brightonco.gov.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie, Brighton has a community emergency response team. Can you tell us a little bit about the program and how can someone become involved?
Absolutely. So our community emergency response team, or our CERT team, is a group of citizens that go through an initial 36 hours training, get training on all kinds of great emergency skills such as disaster medical and first aid. They get training on disaster search and rescue, on psychological first aid, fire safety, all kinds of great emergency related skills. And then they take that training to a disaster full-scale simulation exercise, which is how we end the class. From there, folks have a really good baseline of skills that they can bring back to assist their families, their neighbors, their friends during any type of a disaster or emergency here in the city. But they also have the opportunity to apply for and potentially join the CERT team that we sponsor here in Brighton through the police department. And that team is a group of individuals who we meet monthly and are active in all kinds of different pre-planned and emergency events. So folks will work on communications, they work on traffic control, they've assisted the police department with evidence collection, they assist me in the Emergency Operations Center. So a lot of different ways that folks can get involved once they've gone through the CERT program and have opted to join into the CERT team.
Great. Sarah asked if you can state the non-emergency phone number again.
303-288-1535.
And she also says I'm with Shelley on the speeding issues, multiple cars, motorcycles, and loaded semis driving way too fast on County Road 2. So thank you for letting us know that, Sarah. We'll take a look at that. Stephanie, I want to turn it back to you. Last year you traveled to Florida to provide emergency response support after the hurricanes hit the Florida Keys. Can you talk about your role going down there, and then what were you able to bring back to Brighton?
Sure. So I had the opportunity to travel with a team of folks from the state of Colorado to provide emergency assistance to emergency operations centers within Florida. So when we went down there, we weren't sure exactly what we were going to be doing and where. So one of my specialty roles is I work logistics in emergency operations centers. So I had the opportunity to work with a team of folks in Marathon and Monroe County to assist with making sure that first responders and all of our private contractors and folks in there providing services are preparing to provide services to residents who are going to be re-entering the area, all had the support, the safety that they needed, and we had a way to order and track and demobilize all of those resources. So I think some of the real basic lessons learned from that deployment is that it's just really great to have a series of plans, policies, procedures already in place in advance of an emergency, and make sure that folks have a lot of training on kind of what their roles and responsibilities are. But then on the other side of that, really be able to provide flexibility and be able to adapt and change your plans and work with your partners during an emergency to really work together to achieve the most effective outcomes.
Great. We just have another minute left. Tim, thank you. Same traffic issues on New Energy Drive, also known as County Road 4. Thank you for that information. We will look into that. As we close, I just want to give you all each an opportunity. Is there anything that we missed that our residents should know or that you want to mention? We hit everything?
Well, I just want to say something simple as please call us. Don't hesitate to call us. If you think it's an emergency, call 911. Don't wait 2 or 3 days. And by all means, don't post it on Nextdoor or something like that, and let us know first.
Great, thank you. Stephanie?
And I would like for folks to know that some of the most important things you can do to be prepared for an emergency is know how to get information and be able to get information no matter where you are, whether you're at home, at work, at school, or on vacation. And then have a conversation with your family about what you guys as a family could do to be prepared and have those things in place ahead of an emergency rather than trying to figure it out during a disaster.
Great. It was great information from both of you. Thank you for joining us. As we wrap up, just want to thank our guests from Brighton Police Department and Emergency Management. If we didn't get to your question, please still feel free to leave it and we'll get a response back to you as soon as possible. But thank you for being part of our Talk to Us Tuesday, and we look forward to chatting with you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.